What's going on, guys? Nick here with SQL Technologies. I'd like to welcome you back to your second tutorial on SQL, and today we're going to be talking about select statements. So what the heck is a select statement? Well, the select statement is cornerstone to the SQL programming language. It is what allows you to retrieve data from any relational database. You are going to be writing SQL statements so much throughout your life as a database programmer that you are going to dream about these things in your sleep. They are going to be key to your success as an analyst in any capacity that you might have within SQL. The select statement is going to help you a lot more. I really hope y'all can hear the importance in my voice, because this is how important it is, guys. I'm not telling you this information for no reason at all. I want to see all of you successful programmers one day, and it starts with the select statement. So let's figure out how to write this thing. All select statements, whenever we want to retrieve data from a database, begins with nothing more than the select keyword. It's never going to change. It's always going to be like that if you want to retrieve some type of data from your database. Okay? It's going to begin with the select keyword. You're going to choose the columns that you want to select, and then you're going to choose where you want to select these columns from. What table within your database is this information going to come from? So it's always going to be select columns from a particular table. So without further ado, let's go on ahead and jump right in to SQL Server. And as you can see, at the current moment, I have two statements on my screen. Okay. If you do not know how to get here, let me go on ahead and show you. After you get connected to SQL Server, as a matter of fact, you know what? I like you guys so much, I'll just start at the very beginning. So whenever you first get into SQL Server, your screen's probably going to look like this. You're going to have to designate what server you want to get connected to. The server that has all of your databases, as you saw in the last video. That should automatically default in, but if you accidentally erased it, don't do it again. Just kidding. It's just fine. You're going to put a period, a backslash, and then after that, you're going to put the name of your server. Some people's servers might be SQL Express. That's the default once again. However, if you chose a different name for your server, then this is where you're going to put it in. So we're going to click Connect. And as you can see, it's going to pull up our Object Explorer. Well, how the heck do we start writing code, Nick? You come up here and you click on this New Query button. Boom. We're ready to type some code. So before we are able to retrieve data from our database, there's one thing that we are always going to have to do. We have to tell SQL Server where the heck to get that data from. What database is this data going to come from? Keep in mind, we can have multiple databases within our server, okay? If I need to choose some specific information from a specific table, SQL Server is going to need to know, dude, where the heck is this table located? What database am I going to be retrieving this data from? In that case, we have to use what's called a use keyword, the use keyword. And it looks just like this, use. That's all there is to it. Very novel, very novel. They really thought deeply about this. But you're going to use the use keyword. And then after use, you're just going to type in the name of the database that you want to retrieve your data from. So throughout the duration of this tutorial, we're going to be using the AdventureWorks 2014 database that we created in the first video. So we're just going to say use AdventureWorks 2014. And every piece of code, every single statement that you write in SQL is going to end with a semicolon. That is your way of saying, hey, SQL Server, this particular line of code is finished. I am done with this statement. Okay? Each piece of code that you write can have multiple statements. However, SQL Server is going to read them individually. So, congratulations, this use statement is your first statement as your road for becoming a SQL programmer. Great. So to run your code, you come up here and you click on this execute button, or you can press F5 on your keyboard. And if you wrote out your code correctly, you should get a little message that says command completed successfully. Great. Wonderful. Now that SQL Server knows what database we're going to be pulling this data from, now it's time for us to actually write out that select statement and get some data back. So what if I want to, let's say, pull every single column from a particular table? What if I want every single column from this human resources employee table? Well, we write that just like this. So we come over, we write our select keyword, we write a star, and I'm going to explain the star here in a sec. But all the star really means, as you know, in preliminary terms, is that you want to select every single column that's located within a particular table. Okay? And then we say from, I want to select everything from the human resources employee table. Now let's run that code. Let's press F5, and as you can see, it's going to return to us all of the columns, every single piece of data that exists within that particular table. Okay? And that's the importance of the star. It pulls back everything. Okay? You're not going to want to do this all of the time. This is not best practice. Why? Because you might have a table that has so much information in it that you can actually slow down SQL Server. And you do not want to do that, because remember, you have a lot of people that might be running queries. You have a limited amount of space that might exist on that server. And if you've got a lot of data, the last thing that you want to do is use up server resources by running a super wide query. So take my word for it, whenever you run a query, you want it to be as distinct, unique, and clear-cut as possible. Okay? Less is more in this case. Less is more. We want specific pieces of information, distinct. So as far as writing our first select statement, that's all there is to it. You always say select. What the heck do you want to select? Where do you want to get it from? We can do it with any table in here. So if I wanted to select all of the addresses within this table, I can say select everything from person dot address. Let's run it. Let's press F5. Oh, and when you look at that, something cool happened here. Something cool happened. I'm getting results from not one table, but two tables. So I'm getting results from my employee table, because that's my first statement within my code. And I'm also getting all of the results from the address table, which is my, third statement actually. My second select statement. And that exists right here. Pretty cool, huh? But it's still bad that we're pulling back all of this information. Remember, we don't want all of this information. We only want specific pieces of information. I mean, what if I only want, I don't know, what if I only want this job title column to see the job titles that exist in this particular company? Or what if I just want this business entity ID, or this address ID, or just the address line itself? I mean, me typing out a star isn't really going to help. Well, SQL Server is pretty cool in the fact that you can designate columns, specific columns that you want to pull back. Remember, in this case, less is more. It's better for our analysis. So let's write it out. Let's just pull back, let's see. Let's pull back this national ID number column, this login ID column, and also this job title column. Let's pull this information back. So we just write out our select keyword. Typically, I like to scroll down a bit and give myself some space. So you can do it too. But the good part about SQL is that it does not read blank space. Yeah, wonderful. So I can type it like this. Say, hey, select the national ID number. From human resources.employee. I can come back over here. I can press enter. I can have these on particular lines. And typically, this is how I like writing out my code. I like writing everything from top to bottom. It just makes it easier for you to read. If you have a long line of code that runs off of the page and you take this to another analyst or you take this to your database administrator and say, hey, try to help me with this, they're going to look at you like, dude, where the heck did you learn to write your code at? Terrible, terrible, terrible. Shame on you. So it's best practice to give yourself some white space and make everything easy to read. Now, I just don't want the national ID number column. I also want the login ID column, and I also want the job title column. Well, to separate out columns that I want to retrieve in my query, I separate each column with a comma. So this just says, hey, get the national ID number column, comma, get the login ID column, comma, and the next column that we want to get back is the job title column. However, on the last column that you retrieve, you don't need to write a comma because you're not pulling anything else back from your table. We have all of the columns that we want. You only separate your columns with a comma if you're going to get something else back, or if you're going to write out another column after that. So let's just run this piece of code. I don't want any of the previous statements that we wrote. So just to run this piece of code, we can just highlight it, press F5 or the execute button, and look at that. SQL Server has returned to us specifically the columns that we want. Wonderful. Great. You all are leading a great path to becoming database programmers. Last thing I want to show you is the names of these particular columns right here. Okay. We can actually change these and we can give them what's called an alias. Okay. An alias, a nickname. You're not actually going into the database changing the overall hard-coded name of the column. You're just giving it a nickname just for your own personal use. And to do that, after each of the columns that we want to pull back, all we have to do is write as quotation mark. And we can just say if we want to nickname this ID. Boom. That's it. So I want to return the national ID number column with the nickname ID. And we can do it for each one of these. So I can say as login. And this one as, I don't know, job title in lowercase letters. Done. Now, an easier way of doing that, as you'll see, is you can actually give these things nicknames or aliases without writing as. But it's best practice to write as. Okay? I'm not cussing, I promise. So that's the way that you do that. Let's highlight it once again. Let's run our code. And as you can see, it returned us the columns that we want. And it also gave them those nicknames that we designated. Great. 100% wonderful, you guys. As a matter of fact, no, I take that back. There's one more thing that I want to show you right now. We're going to talk about this a tad bit later. But let's go back up and let's run one of our previous statements that show all of the data within a particular table. This first column, and maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, it might not make sense, but each row of data in every single table has what's called a primary key, an ID number, okay? And this ID number is what makes this particular row of data unique. It's what's called a primary key. I talked about it a little bit in the previous video, but this is what makes our tables relational. This is what actually makes our database relational, as we are able to refer in other tables back to this table based on this primary key. So if this primary key in this particular domain, in this particular table, exists in another table, then we are able to form that connection, because now we have two pieces of data that have a like piece of data, that have a unique piece of data that they match on, and are able to develop this connection. Okay? It's going to be like this 9 times out of 10, or actually 10 times out of 10, 20 times out of 10 in every single table. Every table is going to have a unique identifier for each row that's called a primary key. Okay? Primary key. But you'll see why that's important a little bit later once we start joining multiple tables together. It's going to be really cool. However, for the sake of today, this is how you type out a select statement. Feel free to go to the website, on my website, www.secutech.com/forums. Down under the SQL forum, you'll have all of the class files that you particularly need for this class, and you all should be good to go. If you have questions, drop one in the forum. Your homework for the day is to just practice this. Go into SQL Server and type out some more select statements. Don't jump the gun, but just type out some simple select statements that pull back multiple pieces of data from all of the tables that we have available. Once again, I'm Nick. I'm hungry, so I'm going to get food. Signing out. See you guys in the next video.